Welcome back to the 5G Monetization Forum. I hope you enjoyed that short break, but now we've got an interesting session where we're going to discuss end-to-end orchestration with Alla Goldner, Director of Technology, Strategy, and Standardization with Amdocs. So, Alla, thank you so much for joining me today.
It is my pleasure to be here.
So to start, we've heard so much for so long about the promise of 5G, but it seems that meaningful service revenues are still eluding operators. So I'm curious, is now the money time, or is that still at some distant point in the future?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, you're right. Obviously, 5G started, if we talk about standardization, back in 2014, which is 8 years back. And, standardization obviously takes time, and 3GPP took many years, and not even finished up until now. But non-standalone 5G, where basically we have a 5G RAN and 4G core, has already quite a few of significant deployments all over. And even, recently we see, starting from 2021, quite a few of standalone deployment. I think I counted recently, it was something around 12, T-Mobile in the US, Vodafone and Telefonica in Germany, all three of Chinese service providers, Singtel in Singapore, and some more. So, we do see that standalone technology starting to be deployed, starting to get traction, and we hear about more and more service providers which are introducing it later this year and next year. Now, additionally to that, there is a new ORAN trend, which would be built on top of 5G, I believe, where basically you have RAN architecture being split into RU, CU, DU with standardized interfaces and the whole management layer. And that would be, I guess, the additional to the SA. The technology is also evolving quite a bit, and we hear also a lot of, early stage POC and some limited deployment plans, and limited deployment have started already. Vodafone has one in the UK, which is a significant one. Now, also cloud native technologies, the trend which, we heard about for quite a long, but taking actually, a significant role right now with 5G, where we do see quite a few of network functions of 5G core becoming cloud native. So it is not a buzz any longer, which is a reality which is coming into the picture. Also services, perhaps not as many as we thought would be 10 years back, would be required. We are not yet talking about, distant surgery or autonomous cars, but we do have quite a lot of services which are dynamic and on-demand services, and we do have many subscribers started to use those services on their mobile devices. And also, speaking of monetization of all these nice things, we have quite a few of new technology enabled by standards, where basically the charging and then monetization can be made not just for mobile subscriber based on mobile subscriber consumption, but also slicing charging, which allows, a new monetization channel between service providers and enterprises, edge charging, and so on. So taking all this all together into the same picture actually, brings you, the critical technology enablement from one side, and, from the other side, really a demand, which is for those new on-demand services, and we do see that already coming. So I think the combination of those two, standards, which are finally, available and network can be implemented by using those standards from one side, and those services coming into the play from the other side, those two together actually, as the combined, enable that, 5G wave, which, finally started to happen.
Yeah, this combination of a cloud native architecture and a standalone network capable of delivering slices and otherwise operating autonomously is really quite compelling, but it's not going to be like turning on a light switch. So maybe you could take us through some of the challenges that operators are going to have to work through as they go down this path.
Sure. So, every new technology comes also with the challenges, right? The challenges basically, it is a multi-domain network. And, if we talk about even a slice, which is a virtual network span across multiple domains. They're talking about RAN, H, and core, and and transport, of course. And there will be a different vendors in those domains, including small vendors. And if we look further into RAN domain specifically, and we talk about ORAN, there will be CU, DU, RU also, which might be provided by a separate, small vendors, and all those new interfaces which would need to be supported. So it is definitely a multi-vendor environment, multi-domain environment. Speaking of, applications, and as I said, there was, a buzz and a promise what would be the 5G killer application. So I think that by now everyone realizes that there is no one single killer application. The key of 5G is actually in combining those applications and providing plenty of those applications and assuring that there is an isolation of requirements per each one. So if you imagine each of the applications run over its separate network, but not to build a separate network, rather build a slice of the same network which is provided by the service providers, that really, comes into what is really needed, but then also a challenge because, building of such a slice across a different domain or, supporting several applications at the same time by allocating those slices is definitely a technological challenge and quite complex, quite enhanced network management capabilities are required here in order to allow such an environment. I think that one additional thing that we can talk about is, a play between service providers and enterprises, because up until 5G, it was mostly between a service provider and subscriber. And we see that trend and that model of service providers actually bringing the technology into enterprises taken strong now with 5G. And also, in that regard, we see quite a significant play of the cloud providers, Azure, Google, AWS, where basically, they take over edge deployment, they support, public cloud, along in many cases, along with the private cloud supported by the service providers. And there is actually a big technological challenge on how you combine those clouds, how you manage dynamically, the service, and how you decide in real time which cloud, certain services, certain service slice would pass, and, instantiate network functions, eyes on private, on public cloud by using some weights, or, of operator preferences of the service requirements, and deciding finally how you instantiate those network functions and then those slices is definitely a technological challenge, and, our solutions of network management must overcome that challenge.
So at the end of the day, this is really just an exercise in how do I efficiently manage complexity? How do I hide that complexity from these enterprise accounts that I'm targeting? But that's where orchestration comes in. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more specifically about how operators should think about their investments in end-to-end 5G orchestration and increasingly automation of their own processes.
So, when we talk about orchestration, I would say it is also not one single orchestrator which manages everything. I would say that in my view, orchestration is also based on a layered principles. Then the highest layer would be, service orchestration, which supports super complex service decomposition into the network, translating parameters of the service into network parameters. When you would have perhaps the most complicated layer, which is network end-to-end orchestration, which basically overviews all of the domains, as I said, RAN, H, transport, core, talks with the orchestrators of those domains, gets the information from those domains, correlates the information from those domains, most importantly, manage those domains in the closed loop, right? So I think that layer perhaps has the most of the complexity, but also, and also, that layer basically is the layer responsible for instantiating, for establishing the slices. Then that layer, which is end-to-end network orchestration, speaks, as I said, with a different domains orchestrator, RAN orchestrator, core orchestrator, edge orchestrator, transport orchestrator. And so that would combine the whole picture of layered architecture overall into the service and network orchestration. Now, additionally to that, there is a need and unifying design, actually design of slices according to the service demands. And then I said unified, which is really working with the end-to-end by getting also into a different domains and designing the parameters within those domains. Of course, inventory, which is close to the real-time single source of truth that covers both network and service parameters and see everything which is happening to network in the real time. And the last but not least, I would say the assurance, which has also mentioned, and that by itself also have a layered architecture. And even in standards, we know about NWDAF, which exists ever since release 15, and we hear quite a lot about NWDAF implementation recently. Amdocs is also building its NWDAF, which basically the network data functional, which is allocated in the core network. In addition to that, we have the whole assurance domain on RAN side for ORAN, which consists of non-real-time RIC, near real-time RIC, and all the XAPs and RAPs working with those radio intelligent controllers, feeding them up with the information. And also the recent standard development is about EMDA, management data analytics, which is also actually an assurance solution associated with the orchestrator, which might be on end-to-end layer, but may also be on the separate domain, RAN or core or even non-3GPP domain layer, which basically cares about assurance in the closed loop and provides statistic predictions and even recommendations on how systems should be behaving. So those are, again, orchestration, design, inventory, and assurance are really four key elements of the end-to-end orchestration solution. So, important to mention when we say end-to-end orchestrator, it is not just the orchestrator itself. It is also to design the network, to design those, slices of services, to see them in the real time, to orchestrate them, to manage the life cycle of those services and on slices, and to assure that is happening in the real time. So, customer does not get a degradation of the service, but, gets what he pays for.
So what does doing all that in the real world look like? Maybe you can tell us how Amdocs is facilitating that transition from NSA to SA.
Yeah, surely. So first of all, there are, as I said, quite a few of the service providers who actually already have a non-standalone deployment, and clearly, Amdocs helps them there. Now, additionally to that, we do work with several service providers on enabling demos and POCs, both in North America and in Europe, on network slicing, working with, key network equipment providers, basically in RAN and core domain. Transport would come later, and Amdocs is engaged in several such activities. And I strongly believe in lab, in addition to POC demo, where you can actually, in the longer term, execute the partnership with network equipment providers, and also, be exposed to the different startups which build a new innovative solutions. And specifically for 5G, Amdocs is deeply engaged in 5G Open Innovation Lab that Timo has established. So we work there with several startups and with several network equipment provider, and that work will continue, of course, for a long. So these are our ways, to be exposed to the technology and also build technology along with the service providers and network equipment providers. I can also say that perhaps 2 years ago, the whole thing of 5G network management was more of the theoretical thing. Everyone wanted to know about it, but there were only a few who really had thought on how they and when they implement it. And the reason is that that full 5G network management solution built by standards requires SA deployment. So that was probably the reason, let's say 2 years ago, then that discussion was more theoretical than practical. Year ago, we started to see lots of, incoming RFIs, RFPs, as I said, POCs with the service providers, concrete activities in the labs. So right now, it is definitely something which is happening, not just something which, people are talking about. And, of course, we are happy to see that happening.
And Alla, I think we've got time to take one question here, and I've got an interesting one. Your comment about a unified designer. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more? It sounded sort of like developing a template for a network slice to establish what the parameters are, but just if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so when you, slices might be of different types, of course, standard defines for them, maybe some proprietary defined by the specific service provider. So when we go through design and modeling process, we need to model, we need to put all those parameters, all network functions, which are part of a certain slice, in each of the domains. Certain network functions might be shared or dedicated for a certain network slice, and it is also up to design to define. So this whole process end to end is happening, by the assistance of the unified design that we, of course, build and provide. And by the way, if we talk about designer, one point here for me is important, as I serve also in ONAP TSC, and I am the requirements subcommittee chair. Our designer is built on the foundation of ONAP as the C, and we were actually the company along with AT&T which brought it to open source 5 years ago. Then it was established, and of course still it is aligned and it is compliant to ONAP as the C.
Excellent. Well, thank you to the audience member that submitted that question. And Alla, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with me. For more material from Amdocs, I'd encourage you to visit the Innovation Hub tab on the event website. Alla, thank you again for joining the 5G Monetization Forum.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.